Welcome to the Center for Universal Oneness. We are an open, welcoming, spiritual community that supports all faith traditions and invites you to join us on your spiritual journey. We host different speakers each week to guide and inspire us. We are guided by universal principles of acceptance of all that is sacred, and we strive to live in the oneness of love. Please enjoy this presentation.
Welcome back, Cyndi Swall, who's a familiar speaker to us, and she is known as a lifelong student and teacher of New Thought, and she presents always an interesting perspective on things. And we welcome you back, Cyndi. If your topic today is pivoting, you only have fear to lose or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but welcome back, Cyndi.
Thank you. Or as Jeff Jan says, the pleasurism of a past president. So yes, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. And I started thinking about this topic as we move from, immediately from Halloween into Thanksgiving. And traditionally that's been that, that Halloween had been that period of time that's like that singular day designated to all things scary. But what we've noticed is for the past couple of years, it seems like every day we awaken to a brand new level of terrifying. So the media, the government, the medical industry, even some of our closest friends and family, they continuously pump us and our minds and our news feeds with really negative, scary stuff, right? And it just gestates in our subconscious and just rots there like compost. So taking the time where normally we transition from a fear-based holiday to a holiday really deep in gratitude, we haven't necessarily let go of that toxic fear that leads us into the peace of mind that comes from Thanksgiving. Because when you think about it, so from the Halloween perspective, look at it from the perspective of, say, like a haunted house experience. So it's not the ghosts or the blood or the chainsaw that's the scariest about a haunted house, right? So what's the scariest part about a haunted house? It's the unknown, right? It's having to respond to something that we didn't know was going to happen. So it's not really the event itself. So the more uncertain things feel, the more fearful we become. And so with our increased fear comes higher levels of anxiety. And anxiety can skew our perception of things, or really, like in the face of recent adversity, we've become really ineffective at making good risk threat assessments. And as a result of that, everything we face feels like a life or death decision. So I'm not implying that there's not like any real reason or like any real threats in the world, because we know that there are. I'm suggesting that our interpretation of the level of threat might be seriously heightened. But here's another interesting study in human behavior as it relates to haunted houses. Like when you enter a haunted house, you know intellectually that you're perfectly safe, right? In any scenario. And so this is how it relates to kind of what we're dealing with right now. Yet you go into that situation with your emotions on high alert, like literally looking for trouble. So your blood pressure goes up, your stress hormones kick in. I know some of you, I guess, adrenaline junkies. Is there any people that actually like haunted houses? Like, are you a big fan? Okay. So I know there's some of you adrenaline junkies that actually can leverage those feelings for personal motivation. But for most of us, if these emotions go unchecked, they honestly just make us sick, or we get to the place where we're just like paralyzed with fear. But what's happening here is definitely not life affirming. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that you need to avoid fear at all costs. I guess what I'm saying is, though, if we live every day at this level of this state of consciousness, we are collectively attracting all kinds of trauma and discourse and very tactically creating a reality that we need to be afraid of. In fact, if you go back and look at the statistics in 2019, about 21% of adults faced any kind of a mental illness issues. And that's according to the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. So this is data that's straight out of, of medical statistics. But Since the coronavirus pandemic and all the political unrest of last year, it kind of turned the lives of millions of Americans completely upside down. You might have been feeling that. And it really has exacerbated the trends towards Americans dealing with mental illness symptoms. In fact, close to 48% cited in 21% in 2021. So that means 48%, half of our population. So if you've not been feeling yourself lately, you are definitely not alone. Social anxiety is a mental health condition that's characterized by intense, persistent fear of either being watched or being judged by others. And I just want to know if that sounds familiar to anybody, because that used to be considered a disorder. But in this current state, honestly, this is honestly currently being felt by almost everyone I know in some form or fashion. So, well, there are a lot of people that are throwing around the illness and death statistics. Those are important, but few are talking about the long-term global effects of the collective consciousness of the planet right now and how we're all propagating this whole mess. So, Cyndi, what do you suggest? Oh, Lynn's with us. Hi, Lynn. Let her in. So I'm glad you asked, because I do have some suggestions for this. I think at minimum, there are probably 4 things that need to happen in order for us to start building any kind of a brighter future for ourselves and for the greater whole. I think the first thing we need to consider is just minimizing garbage in. Like, don't become everything you hear. Secondly, I think we need to get mondo clear on what you would like for your personal and collective world to look like. So getting a vision for what that might experience. I think number 3, just making a conscious effort to actively insert more productive things into your cranium and into your experience. And then finally, number 4 is to tell that news story in every single day, and then take inspired action in association with that. Because if we set a vision for ourselves and we start saying, okay, here's what I want it to look like, we have to search for contradictions in our own behavior that might be getting in the way of us being able to get there. And the first thing we can do in relationship with that is to minimize garbage in. And what I mean by that is, and this might hit a little bit of a nerve for some of you, it has for other people I've talked to, is that honoring all of your efforts to educate those less insightful than you. I hate to tell you this, but the only ones listening to you are the people who already agree with you. So the constant focus on, discussion about, and postings about the things that we are most afraid of are literally keeping all this crap in our experience. So my first suggestion to you is to stop abusing yourself. Stop abusing yourself with data. Stop abusing yourself with conversation. Again, it's one of our core new thought principles is that we create our life by what we think about all the time. And so it's worth repeating, like whatever you're thinking about, talking about constantly, and is really like planning a future event. So if you're worrying, you're planning. If you are appreciating, you're planning. If you are blaming other people, you are planning. And Brene Brown goes as far as to say that we actually dress rehearse tragedy, meaning even in our most joyous times when things are going really, really well, we're often waiting for the other shoe to fall. It's like things are really pretty good right now. So, it's like something's got to be lurking around the corner, like something's got to give. And so you've heard me talk a lot about confirmation bias in the past, which means that it's defined as we search for evidence that is supporting what we already believe to be true. And so when we do that, in essence, what we focus on expands 100% of the time. My introduction into the workforce is in the world of journalism. And I learned very early on that what you're seeing in the news is not an entirely accurate portrayal of what's really happening in the world. So I know that may come as a shock to you. Basically, they only report the news that sells. And that's why I only stayed in the journalism field for about 6 months. But so anything that suggests that you think for yourself ends on the cutting room floor because it's not part of the marketing. And I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is what gets people riled up and creates energy is what's going to end up on the news. So that's not that much different than what's transpiring in your own consciousness. Your thoughts are not necessarily an accurate depiction of what's happening around you at this time. So keep that in mind as when you have a thought, and that's called emotional reasoning. Like, because I have a thought, it must be true. So because I'm really irritated right now, you must have done something to me. Or because I'm really afraid, there must be a monster under the bed. Like, that's how we tend to operate in the world. So, by the way, if you haven't already checked it out, there's a Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma. Has anybody seen Social Dilemma? If you haven't, please watch it. It's amazing because it points out how all of these different social networks exploit human weakness, basically our fear, by designing something called positive intermittent reinforcement. And in English, that means that there's undeniable proof that we are being fed only the articles and only the data that support what we consistently express emotion around and reinforce certain political or financial narratives, right? So whether that feels like a conspiracy to you or not, it's just business. And so, but we have to keep that in mind. It is, and like any large business, it's owned by the entities who can afford to direct global communications. So that's the way of the world. That's not new, by the way. This isn't something that just started happening. It's just that now that we have mechanisms like social media that give them the opportunity to be able to get that into people's homes and into their heads much, much more quickly. So the goal here is not to fight the man. My point for you is to not let anything or anyone outside of you have ownership over your emotional sovereignty. So minimize garbage in. Secondly, I want you to get mondo clear. Basically, global fear is only as strong as the sum of its parts. So getting a handle on your own coherent fears is the first step to healing the greater whole. So we still spend 80% of our time thinking and talking about what we don't want. Now I'm going to say that again. We spend 80% of our time thinking and talking about what we don't want, and we can't figure out why it won't go away. Like, why can't we get rid of this pandemic? Because we won't stop talking about it. And so external manifestations are just like pouring concrete. They take the shape of the mold that's been created. So our obsession with the media and endless sources of data have actually infiltrated our psyche in a way that has kind of become the mold. So we just keep trying to stuff our beliefs into that external mold, and it's exhausting. And quite honestly, we've run out of space in there. So there are countless ways that we can create experiences that are much more to our liking. As a coach, it always amazes me how hard it is for so many people to answer the question that I ask them, which is, what do you want? Because when people come to me in a coaching situation, almost always they have a situation they're trying to eliminate from their lives, whether it's excess weight or stress or a job they don't like. So I'll ask them the question, okay, so now we know what you don't want. What is it that you want? And most people can tell me what they'd like to have go away, but they haven't got much credence or haven't given much credence or thought into what might actually replace that. And that's really my encouragement to you, is to think about, if I'm going to create the life that I want, I need to know what that's going to look like. Not life without something, but life with something. So visioning, of course, is a great exercise. You've all done that sort of thing, whether it's in writing, in your mind's eye. I kind of would suggest both, because writing down your vision for an improved life actually forces you to get really uber clear on and gives you insight basically into what you might have missed. So writing stuff down, I highly recommend. But writing itself is a really linear process. So while it serves to get us like kind of better clarity and get some things in front of you, you also need an emotional attachment in order for us to be able to make consistent change. And quite frankly, 70% of the population are visual learners. So anytime you can create a picture of that, and there's a million tools out there now that create digital vision boards or things you can put on your screensavers on your phone. So you can do a lot of different things to kind of get clear on that. I like to search for pictures that get me excited and connect me with the words that I've written down on my list. So what we know about the manifestation cycle is that you have to start changing your thoughts before you can start to change anything else. So, and you change your thoughts. And when you change your thoughts, you talk about things differently. And when you talk about things differently, but we also know the point of manifestation is not in the words either. The point of manifestation is in the feeling that actually spurs a behavior change. So it's not enough to know what you want. You need to know why you want it, because that's your fuel. I want you to just spend one day just taking a non-judgmental inventory, what you read, what you listen to, the conversations that you have, like who are you talking to and about what are you talking? Where do you go and where do you not go because you're afraid to go there? And how do you feel about it all? When you lay your head down to sleep at night, give yourself at least a short break from the media. Once in a while, allow yourself to unfollow those streams of negativity that you've been consuming. And so once again, we talk about the whole, it's not just a matter of getting rid of stuff, that's important, but then you got to figure out, what do I replace it with, right? So, and people ask me all the time when I'm working with clients, they'll say, how do I quit thinking negative stuff? Like, I've been doing this for so long, and you can't just not think about negative stuff, right? Don't think about pink elephants. You can't do that. You have to figure out, what is a more productive thought that I can replace that with? I think it was, in fact, you guys might be familiar with it. I know Jeff is. Remember Will Bowen's thing that he did around the complaint-free, what was that called, Jeff?
Complaint-free world.
Complaint-free world.
So
yeah,
a lot of these folks know about it, Cyndi.
Yeah, so you might be familiar with that, right? So you put the armband, the rubber, like purple armband on it, and whenever you would complain about something, you have to take it off and put it on the other arm. And then you realize that you're doing that about 80,000 times a day. It makes you very conscious of what's going on. In fact, if you're feeling any kind of like health considerations or anything like that, one of the things that I was reading the other day that really was an aha for me, that says, before you were complaining about your health, you were complaining about something else. So the response that our body is having is really just a physiological response to the emotional complaining that we've been doing for so long. And it's like, once again, when I say a non-judgmental inventory, I mean that. This isn't another reason to beat yourself up, but please be aware of what it is that you're taking in and what it is you're saying on a regular basis. So how do we put more productive stuff in? You can't just stop thinking about it. Something you've been looping for months, maybe even years, possibly. So the only way to eliminate a negative mindset is to replace those thoughts with something really much more positive, much more productive. This could mean finding an upbeat podcast of some kind, or a musical artist on Spotify that instills a more positive message. Anything you can do to surround yourself with positive people. They say you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So think about that. Like, what are the people around you most often? What are they talking about? Who are the people you're following on social media who all agree with you, that can reinforce, basically give some validity to the complaining that we've been doing for the last several months? So let your subconscious work for you instead of against you. I might have mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. And that is, there's support data to support the fact that whatever you're thinking about, the 5 minutes before you move into REM sleep, your subconscious will gestate on all night long, like the whole time you're sleeping, which is why you can get up in the morning and kind of have that nagging feeling in your stomach, like something is wrong, even though you can't put your finger on it. It's really just the thoughts that you were carrying with you from the time that you fell asleep the night before. So if you're struggling to replace those thoughts, if you've been looping this for so long that you can't get out of that loop, at least utilize that time when you are not consciously aware of your thoughts to program something else. Put on a meditation, in your earbuds before you go to sleep at night, whatever it is it's going to take to move you into a more positive frame of mind in the morning. So if you're scrolling through your news feed or watching zombie apocalypse before you go to bed at night, stop that. Seek out positive people and redirect unproductive conversation. Meaning you might not have full control over the people you spend time with every day. Maybe it's a spouse or a parent or your kid or a coworker, and you don't have control over those conversations, you do have the opportunity that when you're involved in that conversation to not go there with them. So to redirect unproductive conversations. And if we're being honest, most of us were attracted to New Thought because it offered a message of hope and a community of acceptance. And we're drawn to the possibility that we really are enough exactly the way we are. There's nothing else we have to do to be loved. And so the challenges over the past few years haven't really changed that truth. Crippling fear has caused us to shrink from our inherent power. Anxiety keeps us sequestered in our safe zone. We're afraid to take steps towards the future because there's some ambiguity, right? So because of the ambiguity, we're not taking steps towards that. One of the quickest ways to move through our depression and anxiety is to focus on someone else. And I learned this when I was going through bipolar with my mom when I was younger, because that's what her doctor basically told us. And I mean that in a really good way. To focus on someone else is to ask yourself, like, who can benefit from my gifts and talents? Who can I help? How can I contribute in some way? So as we start doing more and more of those things, we're less focused on our own fear, our own anxiety, and our own conditioning that we've created. And so part of that is you start to spend more time seeking out ways to contribute your own gifts and talents. During that period of time, you start to tell a new story. And that's really our number 4 item, which is start to tell a new story. Once you have a clearer picture of what you like, the life you'd like to be living, now you get to align all of your decisions to make that vision come true. Basically meaning, if you look at the vision that you've created and every day you get up and you ask yourself the question, would this person in this vision do this? Then do that. If the answer is no, then you don't do that, right? So with every choice you make, you ask yourself if the action you're taking brings you closer to the scenario that you've created or keeps you stuck in your present condition. But you have got to tell a new story if you want to experience a new experience. So tell that new story over and over again to yourself and anybody else who will listen. It is completely natural to be nervous when trying new things, like especially in these days of quantum judgment. But remember that negative emotions are not a sign that you're doing something wrong. So I want you to curb the urge to seek reassurance from others about whether or not you're doing the right thing. Should I do this? Should I not do that? It's like you have an internal barometer that tells you whether or not this is the right thing to do for you. Because what's right for someone else may not be right for you. So, try not to seek out reassurance in that way. In fact, getting reassurance actually reinforces the belief that if we do everything right, then we can avoid criticism. And the only way for us to get true confidence in our own abilities to make a new life for ourselves comes from allowing for mistakes and accepting that we cannot please everyone. And that's not our goal in this lifetime. So, and I think that when I think about what people are experiencing now in the way of anxiety and depression and fear, part of it comes from maybe some of the actual things that are happening in the world. Part of it is coming, quite honestly, from the pressure that we're receiving from people around us about whether or not, like we've learned to not trust our own instincts in situations, right? Because I promise you, there's data to support anything, whatever it is you believe, whatever you believe about the pandemic, whatever you believe about politics, whatever you believe about the vaccine, whatever you believe about, the mask, anything that's going on right now, whatever your beliefs are around that, I promise you, you can go anywhere on the internet and find data to support that that is the right answer. So my challenge to you is for you to go inside and listen to what your guides and your angels and your non-physical support system is saying to you about what is best for you. Your physiology is different than everyone else's. Your lifestyle is different from everyone else's. Your beliefs are not necessarily aligned with the people who are driving the media right now. Do whatever feels best for you and own it and be comfortable with it. That said, you don't have to make any pronouncements about any shifts that you're making in your life or about any decisions that you've made for yourself. Simply be at peace with your own decisions. Live your life and see who comes to you. And then finally, I just want to say, and give grace to those people who are not there yet. Fear is a very powerful motivator. So when you think about even the whole point of October and the whole transition that happens at the end of October moving into November, Halloween originated as a tribute to the saints. And it happened this time of year because it was a nod to not just the change of seasons, but more importantly, observers believed that the boundary between this world and the next, basically mean the spirit world, become especially thin at this time, enabling them to connect more deeply with the spirit world. Now, if there's any truth to that, then there's never been a better time than now as we move into this season of gratitude to stop, to ask for what we need, to ask for help, to ask for guidance, and then take the time to listen. So at the very least, you can use this time as a reminder to reconnect with your non-physical support system. The entities who came to protect you through this human experience. You were never meant to do this earth thing alone. So if you feel like you're by yourself, I want you to think again. I want you to commit this season to releasing the fears that have kept you paralyzed in this level of ambiguity, because there's nothing to fix here. The world isn't broken. We've just forgotten who we are. We've forgotten that we are perfectly imperfect. You've forgotten that you are wholly loved, that we are all united in truth. And if you can remember this and show up every day and make decisions and act like it's true, then everything is going to be okay. And we have to believe that. Let's remember the capital T truth as we move into the season of gratitude and really spend some time thinking about what we have to be grateful for, because that's going to shift the collective consciousness of the planet. Thank you for letting me hang with you this morning.